now for a review of what's making the headlines in the papers this morning. Let's bring in Arise analyst Constance Ikwoku. Good morning, Constance.
Very good morning to you, Yolanda.
Yes, I hope you have some juicy headlines for us this morning.
Juicy? Well, we shall see. Are we running? Well, most of the papers are serious newspapers. You know, none of them are, flames. But we have some good headlines today. Morning to you, Charles.
Good morning, Constance.
Good
to have you with us.
Yeah. Okay, to look at the papers with us this morning, we have Emmanuel Aziken. He is a columnist with Vanguard newspaper. Hello there and welcome to the program. We begin with this day. Ijaw leader and last of Nigeria's old brigade, Clark, dies at 97. Tributes have been pouring in since the news broke yesterday. And this headline is apt, last of the old brigade, especially after the passing last week of Pa Ayo Adebanjo, their Afenifere leader. What a generation, Emmanuel. Generation of strong men with a lot of, panache, and they stand for something.
Yeah, the passage of Pa Clark yesterday came as a shock to many people in the sense that he has always been a voice that has been around the polity. You could not discount Pa Clark when it came to issues of national discourse. He was a man who stood to be counted. And he was a man that reflected and expressed a desire for a better Nigeria. Many people described him as an Ijaw leader or a Niger Delta leader, but I think that was his agitations were within the context of a better Nigeria. A better Niger Delta, he believed, would bring forth a better Nigeria. And I also do not want to say that he's last of the Titans. We still have Alhaji Tanko Yakasai, who was a First Republic political actor. That one is still alive. The demise of Adebanjo and Pa Clark does not mean we still have a number of figures still around, though in the late ages. I also want to say that Pa Clark, in as much as we look at him as one of the last of the Titans, he was also somebody that you saw that did not, that he had the last political office as a senator in 1983, but his relevance continued to bear forth, despite the fact that he has not really had much of a political office. That shows you the power in his persuasions, the power in his arguments, and whatever he brought to the polity. Yes. He was a man that people rallied around. And in fact, there's a gist, some people were just saying yesterday that for some people, that meal ticket is gone. Because many people ran under the platform of whatever Pa Clark associated with to fuel their own, sometimes, personal agitations. Okay. Pa Clark's exit is the end of an era, as it were.
Started. Yes.
If I can just jump in there. Charles, I think you were on ground yesterday when this news was released. I don't know if it's okay if you can probably just give us a word or two about how the situation was when everything happened.
Initially, I thought I was covering a press conference being delivered by the late Chief Clark himself. I mean, of course, at that time, I didn't know he had passed on.
You were at the residence, you mean?
Of course, yes, I was at the residence. So, yeah, I got there as early as 10 a.m. And it was when I spoke to one of his sons that he informed me that the late Chief Clark had passed on at about 11:30 p.m. on Monday. That's just a bit close to midnight, so of course he could have lived just 30 minutes more into the next day, but then death comes when it will. It wasn't exactly a beehive of activity at his home, because it appears as if, the news struck the nation with the impact of a thunderbolt. So dignitaries were trickling in and out of the house to offer their condolences, but that was the initial stage. We had statements from other leaders, the president, the Senate president, political associates of Chief Clark, And there I also met a number of his colleagues in PANDEF, the Pan-Niger Delta Forum, who were among the first arrivals to offer their condolences to the family of their late leader.
Okay.
So.
All right, let's look at another story in this day. Very important as well. In historic development, Netherlands to return 119 bronzes to Nigeria. This follows a request from the Nigerian government and is the largest single return of antiquities linked to British expedition. Again, it's mind-boggling the amount of looting, destruction, and savagery that went on during colonial times. Emmanuel, you can come in here. And I think the most unsettling thing is that when you go to school in Nigeria, or when you go through school in Nigeria, this hardly featured in your education. Instead, colonizers sort of cast in a very benign light. And a lot of times you have no idea what happened. These bronzes were looted in 1897 when the city of Benin was attacked. And, you know, similar artifacts littered across European countries in museums and institutions.
Well, I agree with you, because Nigerian history, or the history of a British expedition to Africa, to Benin, is a little bit romanticized. There is a feeling as if there was a romantic shade to what the British, to the evil, the heinous crimes that the British authorities at that time did in Nigeria, especially in Benin. So I want to commend this administration for being frontal in agitation for the restitution and the return of the artifacts that were taken away from Benin. It's not just this administration. In fact, the APC must be commended, because this started with the immediate past Muhammadu Buhari administration. They did return some artifacts, but this is about the largest that has been returned, that is planned to be returned. I commend and doff my hat for the Tinubu administration in this respect. And I'm also delighted that the issue of where these artifacts are going to be settled, placed, has also been settled. They are going to be settled in the palace of the Oba of Benin, unlike the game that was being played by the immediate past governor of Edo State, who wanted to put them in another place.
Okay, let's see how that goes. Daily Trust this morning, Boko Haram, U.S. probes aid to Nigeria. But when you look at the story, actually, when you read it, it reads a little bit different. The quote by the U.S. mission in Nigeria, upon which this story is based, says, and I quote, "Comprehensive monitoring and evaluation systems are in place to help verify that U.S. assistance reaches intended recipients." Charles, I don't know. At the same time, I think that this raises the question of aid money and whose interest it largely serves. There's often, aid is often couched in benevolent terms. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it is, a lot of times it's not, from what we know.
The United States Congressman Scott Perry had claimed that U.S. aid had been funding terrorist organizations, including Boko Haram. I think that was the reason for the mass hysteria that prompted President Donald Trump to, first of all, withdraw this aid, because they needed to probe to find out exactly how this money was being spent. Well, there was this suspicion or allegation that the funds that had been channeled to U.S. aid were being used to fund Boko Haram and other terrorist organizations through back channels. So it was in order to investigate and find out exactly if these allegations were true. Yes, I mean, the aid is usually for humanitarian purposes. That is exactly what it's meant for. But when you have an organization with different individuals, different peoples, and different objectives, then it's possible that there's no smoke without fire. Right. In this instance.
Charles, I'd like to step in here. Something about this headline does not sit well with me. The greater part of my career was spent in the international development in the international development industry. And I know that such organizations are not run by any Tom, Dick, and Harry. These organizations, especially the much larger ones, without naming any names, are the people who are in power are handpicked. So to say this play on words that they want to look into how the money was spent in Nigeria, it's a slightly misleading, because these people who are often brought in are people from the West, people from different countries abroad. So this looking in should actually be looking into the individuals that they themselves have nominated for these positions.
And we also have to say that in general, the suspension of aid doesn't have to do with Nigeria. You know, it's United States Agency for Development. So whatever funding they, have all over the world has been suspended.
Well, I guess this particular story actually is looking at it from the Nigerian context,
yes,
because it's
and
a
Boko
Nigerian
Haram
paper.
to be specific, yes.
Okay, let's see New Telegraph. 40% of Benue farmlands taken over by bandits, lawmakers. 6 Tinubu's intervention as attacks escalate. The lawmaker who spoke on this says there's risk people will be wiped away from their ancestral lands. Emmanuel, how does this happen in a country, in a region that is one of the most fertile and food-producing part of the nation? And the government seems helpless. And I think that's why when you look at the story in the larger context, it's difficult to believe, or people find it difficult to believe that what is happening is not deliberate and calculated, at grabbing land in certain parts of the country.
Well, the lawmaker who said this spoke out of experience on ground, what is happening in Benue. And what is happening, he said, is that some herdsmen, he mentioned them, Fulani herdsmen, are coming and they have taken over a sizable proportion of the land there. And that has mitigated against the capacity of the people that, to farm, that their production has been reduced because they do not have enough land to farm. And what is also interesting in that story is that you said these herdsmen, they also sometimes go into neighboring Cameroon, but that they were given a beating in Cameroon. But how come that in Nigeria, we are treating them with kid gloves? That is the issue. We need the authorities to be more frontal in confronting the issue of insecurity, because not only does it affect lives are directly affected, people are being killed, but it's also affecting us indirectly through raising food prices. People cannot afford the skyrocketing prices of food items. So indirectly and directly, it affects us lives. It affects those in the Benue and also affects those outside Benue, because Benue is a very Benue is a net exporter of food to the rest of the country. It's the food basket of Nigeria, as you point out.
Let me provide some perspective here. The herdsmen actually come in from those neighboring states that have a preponderance of the Fulani population, Taraba State and Nasarawa State. So the ones who come in from Taraba, they are hitting the Kwande Ushongo constituency, where the lawmaker Tese Ugbo comes from. They also come in collaboration with the bandits from my own Sankara axis. The local bandits collaborating with the local Fulani herdsmen, because they have been having a turf war among themselves. So they make it easy for the armed herdsmen to come in. And then the Guma Gwe West Makudi constituency, where they come in from Nasarawa State. As a matter of fact, when the former governor Otom was in power, he had this running battle with the Nasarawa State authorities for allowing the herdsmen to launch attacks across the border into Benue State. He did form the community volunteer guards to check the advance of armed herdsmen, and it did help in some way. Now, the next administration, typical of successive governors, would always try to dismantle what their predecessors did. Of course, the community volunteer guards have been more or less disbanded. The livestock guards have not been empowered. And so these people are having a field day, no security. And unfortunately, it's a situation that is deteriorating. I guess Honorable Ugbo is raising an alarm at the appropriate time. And of course, I'm very sure the authorities are paying attention.
Yeah, attention needed. Daily Independent this morning, politicians will behave well after we reject bad behavior, according to former President Goodluck Jonathan. He was speaking at a book launch, and I quote him, we Nigerians celebrate the wrong thing, and I believe one day the country will get better, or we get to a level where people will reject bad behavior. I mean, are we guilty as charged? Very briefly, Yolanda, I don't think Yolanda has anything to say about it.
No, I actually
guess in
do.
some circumstances,
I actually do.
you know, we are guilty as charged. You know?
Yes, we are guilty as charged. And I think it goes past just the mere everyday person having something to say. Because you just need to turn to social media and you'll see that there are so many comments of how disgruntled the everyday person is. But I think what's important is that we have more and more people in power, more of the elites, more of the politicians actually speaking up against the, you know, corruption that's going on, and that might just bring about more, you know, more solutions.
Right. So let's look at the international headlines for you. A daily graphic this morning. We have President outlines areas for reforms. Also, President Mahama declares assets. Apparently, this is a move aimed at building integrity and combating corruption. This prompts the question, Charles, did President Bola Tinubu declare his assets? I don't think so, did he?
You want me to answer that question?
No, it's a conversation, yes. I don't think he declared his assets.
He did.
Did he? Oh,
but
okay.
Not publicly declared.
Okay.
That is the issue. The crux of what President Mahama has done is that it is public declaration of assets, and which is a cornerstone of the agreement between the United States and Nigeria. We have a United States and Nigeria by commission, which projects that public declaration of assets should be a cornerstone in enthroning public transparency and probity.
Right, and I think President Muhammadu Buhari declared, President Yar'Adua declared, President Jonathan, when he was vice president, declared. So anyway, it has to do with
Buhari
but
declared
not publicly.
Yeah.
So you see, that's the difference. The difference is is that public declaration. I'm sure that was the thrust of your question, whether it was publicly declared. And of course, Mr. Aziken says no, he didn't declare the assets publicly. So private declaration of assets and public declaration of assets, which one do we settle for? Which is more appropriate?
All right, let's look at the Citizen newspaper. The most important thing I think is that, you know, the reason why they ask them or they're required to declare their assets is to sort of match it after they leave office, to see that there is a bit of transparency in running public office and that there is no abuse of office. A Citizen this morning, bring back retired experts. There is talk here about retired engineers, accountants, and other specialists to guide current leaders out of the abyss in terms of helping them to save collapsing municipalities. That is in South Africa. Also to Daily Telegraph, Zelensky could fall as price of peace after the U.S. and Russia held talks in Saudi Arabia without Ukraine and the European Union. President Trump is asking Volodymyr Zelensky to hold elections before a final peace settlement is reached. This was the agreement between Russia and the U.S., and it might just cost Zelensky his job, paving way for someone more amenable to Russia's demands. Yolanda, what a turn of events, the EU and Zelensky. I mean, probably they didn't see it as coming.
Well, the pressure is on. Earlier we were speaking with Charles about this. We had a little side chat about how the pressure is on for Zelensky to relent. But I'm not too sure if this is going to bring out the type of outcome that we expect it to. It could go south very easily. Europe is, you know, backing Ukraine. The Ukrainian war should end. But at the same time, you know, Trump is putting his own mouth inside the whole situation. It could go south, and I'm not feeling positive about this, because everyone is trying to show their strength. Everybody wants to come out the winner. And after all these years, it's been 3 years now, after 3 years of fighting.
Well, I did point out that Trump is leaning towards Russia.
Yes.
The rest of Europe are leaning towards Zelensky.
Ukraine.
So
Yes.
that's where we have that divide.
Yes.
So in the bid to restore peace, according to President Trump, he might just ignite an even bigger crisis, you know, that will consume the entire Europe if time is not taken, and he'll still be sitting pretty over there in the United States.
It's a running story, so more to come in the days ahead. And on a lighter note, let's look at Daily Star. 60% of workers change into their PJs the second they walk through the door.
I'm putting my hand up
Generation
because I'm
Jim
one of
Jones.
them.
Yolanda Charles, who is guilty here? Do you change into your PJ?
I'm putting my hand up.
No, I actually, right from childhood, of course, I used to have them, and I grew up in Ijaw, so it used to be cold, fine and good. But by the time we left Plateau for Benue, where it was a lot warmer, I discarded mine. I always had them, but then I always prefer to sleep in my underwear.
You know, post-COVID. Yes, I
Once
understand.
of course, once I get home, sportswear.
Emmanuel, what about you?
Post-COVID.
Sportswear too. Sportswear.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't do PJs myself.
I don't do
I don't. All right,
don't,
that's all we can take for the paper review this morning. Emmanuel Azikian, columnist with Vanguard newspaper. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And that's all we have time for here on Daybreak. Thank you so much, Dr. Constance, for the newspaper review. I'm Charles Eruka. It's goodbye from me.
And I'm Yolanda Robert. Please do keep it here on Arise News. The morning show is next. Goodbye.